Welcome back to Telltale Videos. This time we are going to review, just in time for the end of the Halloween season, a Halloween classic, The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury.
Yes. And I am looking up, because there were so many great quotes from this one. I wanted to share some with you. But let's get rolling with the review.
And once again, Emily has come
I'm a witch!
in costume, prepared for it.
This one has sentimental value, though, because this is my great-grandmother's cape when she was a young girl, so...
Okay.
My grandmother gave it to me, and I just love it
And
so
cool
much.
Cool new glasses.
Yeah, one of my many sets of glasses. I feel like, though, if I take off the witch's hat, I just look like I should be starting a cult in the 70s. Like, welcome to Waco, Texas, and to the Branch Davidians, or something.
Take off the glasses and you'll look like Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, I would, actually. That's true. I could have 6 outfits in one look. Who knows? But yeah.
Transformers.
Yes. Always in disguise.
So you get the synopsis.
Okay.
Because I'm brain dead today.
That's okay. So, The Halloween Tree, which Greg and I both read the same version, but mine was a digital and his is a hard copy, and it looks really cool, and I love the illustrations. But The Halloween Tree is about 8 little boys who are trying to get their friend to come trick-or-treating with him, only to find that he's sick and he can't come. So they go to this haunted house that they had all kind of decided to meet up at, and meet a gentleman named Mr. Moundshroud. And as they're introducing themselves to Mr. Moundshroud and the Halloween tree, which is this beautiful, like, jack-o'-lantern tree thing, the spirit of their friend has left their friend's body and is traversing through the ages of Halloween night. And they have to go and get his soul back, or his spirit back, so that he can live, because he's on the brink of death. So they go on this really fun adventure through the histories of different death celebrations in different cultures and countries. And as they're doing it, they're like chasing down their friend who's taking different forms, different spiritual forms, but they're trying to basically get Pipkin back so that he doesn't die. And it is super fun and probably the most imaginative thing I've ever read, and I love it.
It's typical Bradbury. I was kind of worried I wasn't going to like it because it's a kid's book. And I'm
kid's book. It does not feel like a kid's book at all.
Those ages. Well, it doesn't. It is typical Bradbury, though, in his style of writing and his imagination. You're right. It's an extremely imaginative book. But it does have a lesson. And I feel that a lot of kids' books, the language is talked way down, assuming that kids are totally stupid and can't understand anything.
Yes.
Bradbury didn't do that.
No.
He keeps it simple enough that kids can understand it, but it doesn't read like a kid's book. It's something that you can get into as an adult, I think.
Yes.
And you just have to, it isn't a terrible thing for an adult's book to have children as the protagonists in it.
Yeah.
Why not? They exist in the world too.
Yeah.
Why couldn't a story be written from their perspective and still be at a more adult level?
And when I was in college, that was something that we talked about a lot in my children's literature class, is that the goal in marketing is often to try and make a book that's enjoyable for both adults and kids. It's not always that way.
Yeah.
But ones that are enjoyable for both the adults, who often have to read them to their children, and kids alike. You've nailed it on the head, and this is a perfect example, I think, of a perfectly married for adults and kids story.
Yeah.
And it took all of, maybe 2 hours total for me to read it.
Yeah, it's
real fast.
It's pretty thin. It's a fast read.
Around 100 pages or something.
We were
it's
able
not
to
a
crank
lot.
through it at the last minute and have it in time for Halloween.
Yes. And so I wanted to share some of the quotes that I really loved from this book, because it's so poetic, but so great. So the first one was from chapter 5. It said, "It made all the good glue go out of their joints and put a little dust of sin in their blood." I loved that quote. That was just perfect. Chapter 6 I had another one, but But in an instant of darkness the night swept in. A great wing folded over the abyss. Many owls hooted, and many mice scampered and slithered in the shadows. A million tiny murders happened somewhere. I loved that quote. That, like, I want that tattooed upon my chest. Like, it's so good. I liked also in chapter 8 when they were flying through the sky. Hey, here we are. Oh, someone see us or you'll never believe. I loved that. I just, like, the sentiments of that was so nostalgic for me. But yeah, it was just, like, there's just such great pieces of, metaphor that he uses, the prose that he kind of sprinkles in there. There was, like, poetry in the midst of it, even, and little rhymes and things that were just so enjoyable. It was a fantastic book. It was just, I can't believe I haven't read this sooner. But it's phenomenal. And I just recently saw the animated TV movie. My husband had me watch it. And I had preconceived notions of this story from that, having never had context for it before. And now that I've read this, so much better.
See, and I went and rented the TV movie right after I finished the book.
Yeah.
Because I just had to find out. And the TV movie is
Very
awesome
similar.
because it was scripted by Ray Bradbury.
And narrated by him.
And narrated by him. And of course, Bradbury was a veteran screenwriter with movies like Moby Dick to his credit. So it was nothing for him to do the script. And he has a very distinct but very good speaking voice. So he was perfect as a narrator.
Yes. The only thing I had wished is I wished that the TV movie had also had the Samhain part of the story. That was really cool. Like, that was very imaginative. I loved the illustration that they did for that in your particular copy, too. That was a really great illustration.
Yeah.
For
The thing that blew my mind most about the TV movie is that Mountroud was voiced by Leonard Nimoy.
Yes.
It didn't sound anything
No,
like
it sounded nothing like Leonard
I've never
Nimoy.
heard him do that before.
No.
He always has his Spock voice in everything else he does.
Yep. Yeah. So that is kind of fun.
Yeah, that was really, really interesting. But like any great children's book, and I really wish all this children's literature that I never read when I was a child, I really wish I had exposure to it and read it. Things like Alice in Wonderland and the Halloween Tree and the Oz books, all that stuff. I never had that to read as a kid. I had Beetle Bailey and the Peanuts.
We read a lot of stuff, but like that stuff I didn't actually end up getting interested in until I was in high school.
Okay.
Like I started actually reading those classic children's stories because I hadn't been exposed to them. Like I didn't see the movie Sleeping Beauty until I was a senior in high school.
Okay.
Like I just wasn't part of that stuff, but yeah. I think I appreciated it more as I was older. I don't know that I would have appreciated it as much as a kid.
Okay. I think I would have appreciated it more as a kid. But I do appreciate them now. I'm trying them out and understanding that they weren't written for a 58-year-old white guy. So, you just have to take stuff
your
like
child, your inner child, though.
Yeah.
Like there's that
you
sense
just have
of
to
wonder.
take certain things with understanding that you're not the
you're not the
marketing
target audience. I don't know. This one felt like I was the target audience. I'm like,
Okay.
oh my goodness, this was written just for me.
Yeah, probably. I think it does suit your personality a lot. The other thing about this being a great children's book is it should teach something. Really, all literature should have something more than just, things going on and gore and battles and stuff. It should have a point. It should have some kind of, not an overt message. It should be a message that is kind of buried in the story to make it really great. It should never be preachy, but it should have a message. It should have a lesson. And the lesson here, and before anybody starts putting this down as Halloween, it's not a Christian holiday. It's it's pagan. It's devil worship, crap like that. especially since there's only a very short bit about the Christian element of the Halloween history, and there's ancient Egypt and a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
the Celtics and stuff like that. The message here is not anything like any kind of devil worship or
No.
death worship or running around as monsters or you know glamorizing violence or stuff like that people tend to take from Halloween. What Bradbury is saying that Halloween is really about is it's about family, it's about standing together, it's about honoring your ancestors, it's about honoring the dead, but it's also about these friends sticking together to support their friend who's ill. In the book, I don't recall it saying that he went to the hospital. In the movie,
It does.
okay.
No, in the book it
I
does.
missed it.
Yeah,
I missed
towards
that.
the end, Malmstroud says there's the because they were gonna head to the hospital, but they're like, no, let's go try the
Okay.
house first.
Yeah, that's one thing he did in the movie is he made it very much more apparent in the beginning that the kid was in the hospital the whole time.
Yeah.
And so, it's all about how that's how you get through tragedies and through life is by sticking together with friends and family and standing by one another.
Yes.
And that's what Bradbury is suggesting as the true spirit of Halloween, the true meaning of Halloween, is to honor one another and honor those who have passed. Which I don't think our society honors the past enough.
No.
A lot of older societies, you did not dishonor your ancestors
No,
at
there's
point of death.
Yeah.
Our society, it's like, oh, that's old. That's, get rid of it.
Yeah, we tend to have this, even like the elderly, as being obsolete, which is
Yeah,
an
put 'em
unfortunate
out,
part of our culture.
Stick
But
them in
like,
a home and forget about them.
yeah, kind of thing. Or like you stick them in the grave and they're dead and gone, and you just got to move on. And it's like, no, that person influenced your life. That person was a part of your life. There's pieces of them left with you.
Yeah.
That you remember. Like, there are phrases coming out of my mouth all the time that my dead grandmother had said many, many times. I'm wearing my great-grandmother's shawl and I never
You're
even
haunted.
knew her. I'm haunted. But the whole point, yes, I would agree. I would take it even a step further that you can grieve in togetherness is almost the meaning of this story. Like, they're grieving that their friend can't celebrate Halloween, and then, of course, they find out it's a lot more serious than they had thought. But it's one of those things where it's learning to grieve appropriately in togetherness and sticking together through these trials and understanding that sometimes it's going to look like the sun isn't coming up again. But it does. Dawn still happens. The moon goes away. Nighttime is over. And the sun comes back. Which is also kind of the theme that he keeps bringing up, too, is that all these cultures did these celebrations to honor the dead because they themselves needed to cope with the thought that this is inevitable. And this is going to happen. And the seasons change. And there is a season for everything. So I thought that was a really well done. And it's so wholesome.
Yeah.
It's such a wholesome book. It's fantastic.
Well, I think everything Bradbury wrote is kind of wholesome like that. I mean, he has dealt with some much more adult subjects, but he wasn't like horror. He wasn't like Stephen King, where he just had all kinds of gore and violence and sex and just extreme horror, like so many writers today do. Bradbury he wrote horror, but he wrote from a much more from a much more wholesome viewpoint. That's not really. There's a different way I want to describe that, but the words aren't coming in. My mouth.
That's okay.
He had kind of a vision of small town Illinois where he grew up that he brought into all of his fiction, and it was, of course, mostly a fictional ideal, because in real life things aren't quite so wholesome as what he would have made it out to be. In real life, small towns aren't perfectly wonderful places where everybody's happy and everything's great.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yes, it was an idealized version of his youth that became how he felt life should be lived. He learned lessons out of it, of how a person should be. And he brought that to all of his stories.
Yeah. And you can definitely see it in this one. It's
And
just beautifully done.
and I do lament, I mean, even Dracula, we just finished reading that one, ended on a very positive note. You know, the heroes won the day. You don't get that in today's fiction.
No. There's a lot of
Today's
tragedy.
fiction, there is, it's, yeah. Much
Or it's
more
like, yeah,
tragic
we
and
won,
much
but
more-
we're all scarred and traumatized by it.
Yeah.
Like, even if there's goodness at the end, it's like, well, now we have to deal with all our feelings because of it. Yeah.
So I think there has been a shift in our society away from those idealisms, of those positive idealisms, and focusing a lot more on the negative.
Yes. And that's a lot of that too, is my generation is very dystopian feeling, just because, I mean, we had 9/11, we've been at war for decades. I don't know a time in my lifetime where we weren't at war, or I wasn't aware of some kind of warlike conflict happening somewhere in the world. And that's just kind of
But
gone
here's a
into
strange
everything.
thing about that. You didn't grow up with the very real possibility of the entire world ending by morning.
But we do. There's
That's-
all kinds of talk of nuclear stuff all the time. There's all kinds
but
of
it's
like,
not. It's not so real as it felt in the 70s and 80s.
yeah.
I mean, it felt like, yes, tomorrow the world could be over. It was a constant, like, sword over your head.
I
when
feel
you were
like
living
we
at
have,
that time.
though. I feel like there's constantly that fear of, oh, war's coming directly to American soil at any moment. Like 9/11 made that very apparent to us. And
Well,
whether
yeah.
it's going to be nuclear or not, because there's always talk of nuclear stuff, there's always talk of, oh, North Korea is going to throw this satellite up in space. We don't know what that does. Or China might be blowing up, all these other things that they're always constantly talking about. And even with Russia right now, like we have been in constant fear that, okay, terrorism can happen at any moment.
Okay.
And our schools are getting shot up. And we have all these other things. Like, it's not that the time is worse. I think it's as bad as it's always been. But we've
Yeah.
been able to communicate it faster because of our technology now. And that wholesomeness has left us because all the bad is what's sensationalized. All of that is what's getting communicated faster because they're fear-mongering. So I do
True.
think,
But also look at my dad's generation growing up during World War II, where the whole world was at war,
yeah,
and you had on both sides of us these crazy dictators trying to commit genocide and just
we have
rolling
that
out.
now, Greg.
It's not like
Iran
World War
is killing its own people for fun.
II. Very
Literally.
much smaller
Yeah.
scale than World War II.
Yeah, but it's still real.
But
It's still really
the
happening.
difference
We're
is
still
that
very-
in World War
yeah.
II, people pulled together and were positive that we could win it.
Yeah, but now we don't trust our governments enough because they haven't proven to be as trustworthy.
Yeah.
Because it's communicated faster when they suck. So we're extremely dystopian. We're paranoid. We're afraid of our government. We're afraid of what's going on in our world right now because it's being communicated far faster and with much more violence. It's not as well screened. We can get access to all this information. So we're living like there's a knife to our throat at all times. We've been that way since 9/11. So I don't necessarily think it's any different than what your father experienced. It's just now we're desensitizing ourselves instead of standing together
Yeah.
because it's too overwhelming and it's too much. And who can you trust?
Yeah.
Because it's communicated that everyone sucks all the time. So that wholesomeness is definitely gone from this generation, and that's why it's so dystopian.
But you still have to remember that World War II generation, they were born into the Depression, where nobody had a job, nobody had food. The farmlands were blowing into the air.
Yeah,
And then came World War II.
yeah.
And that's what they grew up through. And they still believed in the wholesomeness and stood together and banded together and worked together and overcame all those things.
And I think that's why my
and
generation...
none of us knows anything like that.
No, but I think we're always afraid of it. Like, we've had 3 recessions since I was born. Like, I've lived through 3 recessions. This is probably going to be the worst one yet. It's going to go for decades, according to what economists are saying. So it's like that's an impending doom we always have. So I'm not saying like, what I'm saying is, instead of saying that someone had it worse, you need to recognize that every generation deals with things differently, and it is just as bad.
Yeah.
It's harder. It's like I understand that, like, yeah, that sucked for them. This sucks for us too, because we've never lived through this. Some older generations are probably like, oh, we had it worse. I'm like, good for you, but this is the worst I've had it, and that's hard. And that's why there's not as much wholesomeness left in a lot of our literature anymore, is because we have become so individualist and so desensitized. We aren't thinking of banding together anymore because you can't trust anybody.
But I think today's writers should understand that part of what could make us more hopeful is if we had things like the Halloween tree.
Yes,
And
I
we
would
had,
agree.
Movies and TV and music and stuff that was more upbeat and positive and
Yes.
and presented
This more we will overcome mentality instead of a great another shit
presented
show.
an optimism. It doesn't have to be a completely oblivious optimism, oblivious to the real problems, but just be more optimistic, have more upbeat endings, have the heroes win. I mean, that's a big part
My
of
generation calls that false positivity.
Yeah, but people want it. That's a big part of why
Yes.
Star Wars became so big as it did, is because the heroes won.
And it was wholesome.
Lord of the Rings too.
Yeah.
People love it because in the end the hobbits win.
Evil is thwarted. And that's,
Yes.
it's one of those things. One of my favorite bands, Need to Breathe, has a really good lyric that sums it up. But it's like, tell the book to turn the page, 'cause I get stuck where the villains get away. Because that's where like my generation is in our lives, and that's why that wholesomeness isn't there. We are getting stuck where the villains get away, and we don't see that as much in real life anymore. So we're pulling too much from realism almost. But yeah, there is a lot of fun making about like false positivity and this, banding together, friendship is magic kind of thing. Has been kind of like the opposite end of that spectrum. But then you have things like My Little Pony made a huge impact on my generation. When we were in college, there was something called bronies, where these guys who like to get together and hang out and watch My Little Pony. Because it is friendship is magic, and it is wholesome, and it does have fun plots and beautiful cartoon animation, and it was a great show. Like, people enjoyed that. I think that is some of that, us craving that and wanting it. I definitely feel like the Halloween tree had those kind of vibes for me, but without like the cutesiness.
Yeah,
It still was spooky.
it could have become really cutesy.
Yes.
But Bradbury did a good job of walking that edge.
Yes,
And,
and
not
keeping
going
it
there.
kind of, I won't say dark, but on the brink of shadow.
It was dark.
Yeah,
There was a lot of darkness to it.
I suppose. Yeah, there was a lot of darkness.
But it
didn't
was
feel so
darkness
dark as like Dracula
Well,
or anything.
well, no,
though.
because it was a darkness that kids could handle, one that wasn't going to give them nightmares.
Yep. It was just precious. I loved it. I loved every moment of it. It was great.
So, yeah, one more top tale for our list.
Woo! Top tail. Can you
Kind
show
of
them?
unexpected.
Show them your book. I love the illustrations for this one.
Yes, this
They're
is
so good.
It's a recent edition by Alfred Knopf. So it's not super collectible. It's easy to find, not expensive to buy this copy, but it's got such beautiful illustrations throughout. Beautiful, cool chapter headers. I love the pumpkin.
With the pumpkins. Each one is different.
Yes.
I even
And,
had that in the digital version, but it wasn't as cool as what you have in the hard copy.
Some awesome black
Beautiful
and white
spreads.
watercolors. There are some color plates in here too. I haven't run into one yet. I was gonna show. There's one. Color plates are
Of the
amazing.
Halloween tree. It's beautiful.
This is just a great addition. This is what I would suggest if you're looking for the Halloween tree.
Beautifully
is buy
done.
this edition by Knopf. I think you can get it on Amazon.
Yep. Yep. Amazon. Lots of places that have been carrying it, actually. I was Googling it when I was looking for a digital version of it. And yeah, there's a lot of places that have
Love
it.
got to be a pseudonym. Gris Grimley.
Gris Grimley? No, it might be a real name. Who knows?
I don't know. I'm assuming that's just an art name, but that's the illustrator. He did an amazing job.
Yeah,
I've never
it's
heard
fantastic.
of him before.
No, I hadn't either, but
Love his
fantastic.
work.
Really great. So yeah, 10 out of 10 for me.
Oh yeah, me
Loved
too.
it. And I don't have much more I can say other than, like, you need to read this book. My synopsis does not give the style of writing credit that it deserves. It's beautifully done.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I lament we don't see these days. A lot of people complain about antique styles of writing,
I love that style.
but the style, simply put, is just choosing words that have a lyrical sound when you read it, so that it's more than just words. It's not just simple speech. It's not just simple communication.
It's like reading a poem or
The
song.
individual sentences, it doesn't matter what the author is talking about. It's just a joy to read.
Yes.
For the way he puts words together. And Bradbury was one of the last ones that was a master of that sort of style.
I miss it a lot. I think that's why I love classics so much, is because nobody writes like that anymore. And I love that style of writing. I shouldn't say nobody. I have run into some authors who are really good at it, and for some reason my brain is not letting me, like, bring them up to mind. But there are some, like, I felt like, the gal who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass did a lot of that very lyrical sounding writing, and I enjoyed that a lot when I read her work. That's the only person I can think of most recently that I read.
Yeah,
that
I
did
haven't
that.
read enough current authors to know if there are any that do. The ones that I have don't have. They have a much more straightforward style of writing, which is what most people today seem to prefer.
Yeah.
But I think they should open up. It's Bradbury. You don't have to struggle with.
No.
His style.
You just keep
in
going.
that style is very easy to read.
It's beautiful.
Others might be a little more difficult to read, and you have to spend a little more time with it, but it's worth it because of how beautiful the words are.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. So yeah, come back for more, guys.
Yeah, we got Martian Chronicles we've never touched, The Illustrated Man,
Yeah.
Dandelion Wine, lots more Bradbury we can look into in the
Yes,
future.
Dandelion Wine is one I've really wanted. It's been recommended to me multiple times, and I really would like to read it. So
It's related to Something Wicked This Way Comes. It takes place in the same town.
oh, cool. All right, now I have to read Something Wicked.
I didn't
This
know
Way
that
Comes.
until I started
Yeah.
reading Something Wicked just in September and was researching the background on it for the video, and found out that it's part of a whole series. There's Something Wicked, there's Dandelion Wine, and there's a new one. Not new one, but one of his last novels. I think it was his very last novel, is set in that same city also.
Okay, that poor town
Forget
has
the
been
name
through
of it.
so much. They've been through so much. But yeah. Alrighty. Well,
Not like Gotham City. That
no,
place has been blown
gosh.
up about 50 times.
Gotham City. Shaking my head. And London. Everything happens in London. All the
Martian
universes
invasions,
happen in
vampires,
London.
Mummies.
Frickin' A. But yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. This was a fantastic read. Enjoy it with us. Like and subscribe.
And happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Bye.